So just recently I saw The Snowman, directed by Thomas Alfredson, and it was absolute hot garbage. Or should I say cold garbage. If, like me, you saw the trailer and thought, wow, that looks barely interesting at best, you too will be disappointed. It appears that the film was edited down heavily from whatever they had when they made these trailers, because the trailers feature a lot of footage and dialogue that is totally absent in the final cut. I'll get into that when we get to the spoiler section of the review. The Snowman is just a very uninteresting movie. It's a crime/mystery thriller with absolutely no intrigue. The main character is boring and one-dimensional, and the killer has no consistency. It's like they thought that writing the main character as an apparent alcoholic would count as actual character writing, when in fact Harry Hole, yeah, that's the main character's name, has pretty much zero character traits whatsoever. We're told he's kind of a fuck up, but also that his past cases are studied by new police officers?
We studied your cases at the academy.
His partner during the movie, Katrine Bratt, is a similarly boring character, but with the added bonus of being senselessly irritating. There's a scene where while Harry is questioning a suspect, she continuously interrupts with hostile and leading questions to the point where he denies further questioning unless in the presence of a lawyer, therefore totally fucking up the work Harry was doing. J.K. Simmons is in this movie, but he seemingly has no relevance to anything that happens. Val Kilmer is in this movie, and for some reason, all of his lines are dubbed in. It's so distracting that in his first scene, there's a moment where he finishes talking and his mouth keeps moving. The voice sounds absolutely atrocious, and there was seemingly no effort put in to actually match what he's saying to the footage. The effects are absolute garbage too. There's a scene where someone gets their head blown off with a shotgun, and it's absolutely laughable at how terrible the CGI in that scene is. Like, here's the thing. If you don't have the budget to pull off convincing CGI, then don't use it. The head blowing up didn't have to be shown on screen. It added nothing to the film. There are so many ways you could have filmed that scene that didn't involve any CGI. Also, it was just a totally unnecessary scene, but I'll get to that later. The editing was also an absolute mess. There are many scenes that will have you going, wait, what? Where you have to take a minute to try to figure out what was meant to be shown through that haphazard editing. Also, a couple times they try to intercut actions from different locations, but the execution is just so lazy that it ends up being confusing single-second long clips of a random action thrown into the middle of an unrelated scene. Many breaches of the 30-degree rule, which for those of you who don't know, is a rule in editing where if you're changing a shot that's still pointed at the same subject, that you should change the angle by more than 30 degrees, otherwise it looks terrible and jarring. Here's an example of the 30-degree rule done right.
Write your own songs.
Here's an example of the 30-degree done wrong.
I told you I'd think about it, and I have, and I really need you behind me.
Breaking the 30-degree rule is something that can be done with artistic merit, like in Trainspotting, but the Snowman is not doing anything creative here. It's just poor editing. Another thing they did a lot of was, instead of zooming with the camera, they just zoomed the footage in post. It's the difference between this and this. And it looks terrible. I'm going to talk about some things that pissed me off about the film, so spoiler talk coming up. If you don't want any spoilers, skip to this time in the video. Just gonna give you some time to click ahead. Okay, 3, 2, 1. First of all, here's all the footage and sound bites from the trailer that aren't in the final film.
He calls himself the Snowman Killer.
Building snowmen, cutting things up into little pieces, that's what a child does to establish order.
You could save them, you know. Gave you all the clues and everything.
Us together.
Just getting that out of the way. So the first scene of the film shows the Snowman Killer as a child. He's living in a house in the middle of nowhere with his mum when this guy shows up, who both seem excited to see him, and they mention that he comes over every Tuesday, but that this day isn't a Tuesday. He comes in and tests the boy on random historical dates and gets more annoyed every time he gets something wrong, to the point where he hits the boy's mother because he wasn't getting his answers right. Don't know who this guy is or why any of this is happening, but fine. The lad then fucks the boy's mum, after which the kid finds out he's an illegitimate child. The man drives off and the mum and the boy drive after him, and then the mother deliberately drives her car onto a frozen lake where the boy gets out, but the mum lets herself drown. Oh, and also the kid builds the snowman in this scene. Okay. You'd assume that the motivations for these killings has something to do with the victims being mothers that are with a man other than the one they had their child with, because that's seemingly a thing that the killer has experience with. And you'd be right, the whole film is just the detectives figuring this out, and I thought there was going to be more to the motivations, but that's literally it. He just kills women who are with men other than the man that they had their child with. The snowmen mean nothing. He sometimes puts their head on a snowman and sometimes he doesn't. The snowmen have no significance to anything whatsoever. He just happened to build one on that day where his mum died. He also sometimes kills guys that are too close to the truth as well, and tries to make them look like a suicide, only seems to deliberately make them not look like a suicide. Like, what he does is he shoots them point blank in the face with a shotgun, puts the gun in their hands, and then puts a snowman head where their head just was. The snowman head melts by the time the authorities get there, but why does he bother doing this? Doesn't it just ensure that it's obvious that it wasn't a suicide? Harry shows up to one of these and he's like, why are there coffee beans on the ground by the body that the killer usually uses for the mouths on the snowmen? Why is the body all wet? Why are the bullet holes from the shotgun directly behind the body on the wall instead of on the roof where they should be, because you need to angle a shotgun to blow off your own head with it? And the other police are like, we have professionals that look into that kind of thing. Who cares? It's a suicide. End of story.
It was a suicide. End of story.
Like, holy shit, how much more blatant evidence do you need? It makes no sense that forensics would ignore this, and it makes even less sense than the killer would bother leaving so much evidence that it wasn't a suicide when it's clear that he did want it to look like a suicide. Also, when I was talking about this terrible CG, I was talking about this scene where they show a character having his head blown off with the shotgun in this fashion, and it just looks so bad. Like, could you not have filmed the scene like from the side of the chair he was sitting in and only showing us from under his neck, hearing the gunshot, and then seeing his hand drop, which then has a shotgun placed into it by the killer? Again, if you're incapable of pulling off decent CGI, then don't use CGI. Find a different way to show it, or don't show it at all. You're a filmmaker. Be creative. What's even more annoying is that the scene was unnecessary. We'd just been told about how this guy killed himself, and we have photos of his body in a chair, which as a still image looks fine. Then Harry goes, what are these on the ground in front of the body? They look like coffee beans. So the audience is left with the clear knowledge that this wasn't a suicide, and that the snowman killer did it and tried to make it look like a suicide. And then we get a flashback scene of the murder happening, which no other character was there for, with the awful CGI head explosion for a scene that gives us information we already figured out and nothing else. Aside from that, the conclusion to the film is one of the worst I've ever seen. Harry confronts the killer inside the house from the start of the film, where he has Harry's ex-girlfriend and her son held hostage. Harry gets up and he overpowers him and they have this little fight, after which the killer runs out into the snow. Don't know why the killer runs away, considering he has a gun and Harry doesn't, and therefore could just shoot Harry right there, but sure, whatever. He runs away. Harry frees the two other hostages and then runs out after him onto the frozen lake. He can't see him anywhere, so he just yells, "Come on, what are you waiting for?" As if the killer is waiting there for him and he's not presumed to be running away. Harry then gets shot immediately after saying this, which was pretty funny, and the killer walks out from like 2 meters off screen. I mean, he's wearing all black and standing on a frozen lake surrounded by nothing but snow, but somehow Harry doesn't see him. The killer then walks forwards, about to give the finishing shot on Harry, and just walks directly into this neatly cut hole in the ice. Like, it's absolutely hilarious that on this massive, thick ice frozen lake that he just didn't see this neat little hole cut right in front of him and he just fucking steps into it and drowns, and it's bloody comical. And that's how the film ends. Like, that's actually it. That's the big conclusion. He just fucking walks into a hole in the ice and kills himself. Overall, the film was a boring and nonsensical mystery thriller with no mystery. The killer has incredibly bland motives that are basically known by the audience from the start. The main character isn't a character. Even the director seems to not like this movie, but he attributes it to the lack of time they had filming everything in Norway. But to be honest, I think this film was fucked long before that. Not a single performance stands out in any way other than the ones that stand out for being fucking awful. But I wouldn't blame the actors. The script gave everyone absolutely nothing to work with. There is no intrigue, the camera work is incredibly basic and uninspired, the editing feels very last minute, and the whole thing is just super nonsensical. There are zero redeeming factors to this movie whatsoever, so I'm giving it a 1 out of 10. Don't see this movie, it's not even entertainingly bad.